All right. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Mike Fodrill, and I'm the Executive Director of the Indiana Statewide Independent Living Council. And I'm really glad to welcome you guys to our webinar, it's the public policy and the upcoming legislative session. In this session, we're going to be talking about the 25-26 legislative session, bills that we're proposing, changes that are going to be in that session, and we'll also talk about how a bill becomes a law, and there'll be a chance for a Q&A as well at the end. And really glad to be joined by some fantastic people here and some organizations that are going to be joining us. So let's go ahead and start by kind of talking about kind of who we are and what we are kind of all about. And so again, I'm with the Indiana Statewide Independent Living Council. We're an organization. Our mission is to empower people with disabilities to live their own lives, and that we work alongside the Centers for Independent Living on statewide projects that impact people with disabilities. And really glad to be here with you guys today. So let the rest of my panelists tell you a little bit about them and their organizations.
My name is Macy Pull, and I'm the Executive Director for Down Syndrome Indiana. Down Syndrome Indiana has been enhancing the lives of individuals with Down syndrome for over 30 years. We provide advocacy, education, programming, and support to families. And we also design a lot of our programming to really enhance the lives not only of individuals with Down syndrome, but also the professionals who serve them, educators, and also medical professionals. And we're also very excited to be here today.
Great. If I could jump in real quick, Tom, before you do, I forgot to
Absolutely.
mention about the accommodations, and I wanted to make sure that people do that. We do have ASL interpreting available, and those interpreters are spotlighted on your screen, so you should be able to access them if you need to. And we also have CART closed captioning available as well. If you hit the closed captioning button on your Zoom, you should be able to see that. And if you have any issues with accessibility today, type those into the Q&A, and we will work to address those as soon as we can. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Mike. My name is Tom Krishana. I serve as the Chief Legal Officer at the ARC of Indiana. If you're unfamiliar, the ARC is a statewide nonprofit that provides advocacy and other services for and with people with intellectual and developmental disabilities and their families. Our mission is ultimately to help individuals with IDD realize their goals of living, learning, working, and thriving in the community. We manage the ARC Master Trust. We run the Erskine Green Training Institute, have a robust family advocacy network, and have a strong public policy advocacy presence, which you'll hear more about today. I'm happy to be here and be a resource.
Hello, my name is Rachel Deaton, and I'm with the Autism Society of Indiana. And our mission is really to provide support, education, and advocacy for individuals on the autism spectrum and their families. We work to increase understanding and acceptance throughout Indiana and through the lifetime of an individual. We do offer resources, trainings, and advocacy support. And we are here to help individuals navigate the world of autism in Indiana. Okay, Macy. So today I get to describe how a bill becomes a law and just give you a little bit of a foundation of how that process looks like. And actually, redistricting in Indiana is a perfect example of how it works. And I can tell you and bite it down to you a little bit in size this week. So first, a bill is introduced. A legislator introduces a bill to either the House or Senate. And it's often inspired by constituents' concerns or advocacy areas in the disability world. But for redistricting, it was submitted last week to the House committee to become, it was a bill. And then this week, it's submitted to the Senate committee to become a bill in the Senate. And then when the bills are introduced in each House, then they are reconciled. But this week is perfect. So yesterday, a bill was introduced to the Senate, and it was out of committee. And today it's added to the whole session. So the whole Senate session can amend the bill or propose amendments. And then it is voted on by the whole Senate tomorrow, potentially. So that's how it does. Now, when both the Senate and the House pass bills, if there's differences, they are reconciled, and then it's put forth to the whole legislation to be passed. If it's passed, then the bill is sent to the governor to be signed into law, and then it becomes a law. So that is a little bit about how a bill becomes a law in Indiana. And I'm happy to answer any questions about that if you have any other questions about that in the chat.
All right, so let's get into the fun stuff. I'm going to do the 2026 legislative session, kind of where we are. And then I will follow up with some of the priority bills the Arc of Indiana is gonna kind of push and advocate for this coming session. As you're probably all aware, the legislator's a little busy at an odd time. We're not supposed to see them back until January 5th. But with redistricting, which I'm confident you've seen the news, they came back early. And so the governor called a special session. There's been some back and forth about whether this is actually a special session or whether they showed up or just showed up early. But either way, they're in session. So Rachel kind of walked through how the bill becomes a law. I'm going to give you a little more details just as a kind of real world example of the redistricting bill. But the House came back in session on December 1st. The Senate came back in session yesterday. So they're doing work. The House is kind of on recess until possibly Friday if they need to come back in. Again, the chief reason they're here in December is redistricting. Our sessions are normally January to March or January to April, depending on if it's a long year or not. And so this is certainly a unique year if you're not used to following Indiana sessions. Again, House Bill 1032 is the chief reason for it. It's the redistricting bill from Representative Smoltz. It will dominate the session. It will not only dominate December, but we're anticipating that it will dominate really the short session once we get back in January as well. So to give you a sense of how this works and kind of illustrate Rachel's points, with a strong caveat that bills do not move this fast. So this is certainly an exception to the rule. But to give you a sense of kind of the flow of it, the House came back on December 1st. A bill introduced has a first reading, which kind of puts it on the books. HB House Bill 1032 had its first reading on December 1st. Very quickly, it was committed to the House Elections and Apportionment Committee, and the House Elections and Apportionment Committee met on December 2nd. Again, extraordinarily odd it's moving this fast, but to give you a sense of how it flows. It passed out of the House Elections and Apportionment, which it can take at any one of these stages, it can take amendments. It can be amendments proposed by individuals on the committee. If it goes back to the floor of the House or the Senate, those representatives and senators can offer amendments. It certainly doesn't mean they can pass, but it gives everyone, if they're called, an opportunity to discuss the bill, discuss the amendments proposed. So there were some amendments proposed to the House Elections and Apportionment Committee. Those were not successful. So it ultimately moved out and passed the Elections and Apportionment Committee on the 2nd. So again, came back to first, passed out of the House Committee on the 2nd. Second reading happened on Thursday the 4th. And then third reading, which means it was passed, an opportunity to pass the House, happened with a vote of 57 to 41 on Friday the 5th. And it was referred to the Senate. Again, extraordinary, fast. So first, second, fourth, and fifth were already through the House on the bill. That's how it processes through one side of the House. The bill will then flip. It'll go through the process on the other side and see if they can come to an agreement on a general bill. How that looks on House Bill 1032, it was referred to the Senate. They showed up yesterday on December 8th, and they heard and referred it to the Senate Elections Committee, which had its hearing yesterday at 1:30. For those of you who watched it, it was 6 hours. It ended about 7:30 last night. They took testimony from about 150 witnesses at 2 minutes each, and ultimately it passed the Senate Elections Committee 6-3. So that's kind of where it sits right now from a redistricting standpoint. Certainly, this does not have strong applicability to the disability community, but it has a strong applicability to what the session is going to look like as a whole, because we think this issue is really going to dominate not only the early discussion, but maybe some of the actions that happened when they get back in January. So from now, since it's passed the Senate Elections Committee 6-3, it will move on to the second reading for the Senate, which will likely be tomorrow, and then third reading to pass on Thursday or Friday. And then if it passes the Senate, if anything changes, the House will have to come back and consent to it. So they'll have to meet and agree. So that's the process for the redistricting bill. It is a bill that is looking to possibly move from introduction, first reading on December 1st to possibly being done whatever Friday is. What is Friday? December 12th. Okay. Extraordinarily fast. but to give you a really good kind of quick example of actually how these flow through. Now, on a normal bill, it'll get introduced early January, and it'll get assigned to a committee. You'll have the same process, opportunity to testify, opportunity for committee members to ask questions of the witnesses, offer amendments, vote on it to pass it forward or not. And then it'll flip and do the same thing. So at every stage of that, there's opportunities to amend it and there's opportunities to kill it. So that's why it's so difficult to get bills passed, because of that process. But we'll see what happens on redistricting. It is not a done deal, certainly. Some may think because it passed the Senate elections, it is. 3 of those votes indicated yesterday at about 7:30 last night that they're reserving the right to change their vote on the floor of the Senate, but they feel like it should go to the full Senate for more vetting and more discussion. So we're paying attention to what's happening there. But that's chiefly why, that's almost exclusively why they're back in session here in December. However, they are still conducting other business. The Senate's doing more than the House did, but just to kind of run through very quickly, just to give you a sense, they're still doing things. So the House committees met last Thursday, and not only was the redistricting moving, but they also heard there were 3 committee hearings. Public Policy had a hearing on a potential move of a riverboat gaming license to a Fort Wayne casino. There was a cryptocurrency bill that was heard in the Financial Institutions Committee. And then there was also a hearing as it relates to utilities and energy on some performance-based rate making. So still in session and doing things just earlier than normal. Like I said, the Senate is a little more active. This morning, Senate Agriculture had a hearing on veterinary licensing. There was I think that was actually yesterday. Yesterday was the vet licensing bill. There was a motor vehicle bill through Homeland Security and Transportation this morning. The session will come in at 1:30 here in about 13 minutes, although it'll probably be delayed very briefly. And then there'll be a couple more committee hearings. There's going to be a wireless communication device policy heard in education and career development. So a prohibition on phone use in schools. Again, the Senate's taking up the riverboat relocation under public policy. And then most pertinent kind of to our area, the Judiciary Committee is hearing a few bills. There's going to be an immigration one and a code correction, but also SB 71 would be something to pay attention to as we move forward, which is a various probate bills bill, but it's a really a large modernization and cleanup bill in our guardianship law. So it's long overdue. SB 71, as it's drafted now, just to give you a sense of it, it's going to launch really a full-scale review of what our guardianship law in Indiana looks like. It will create a task force specifically to modernize our guardianship statutes. It's going to include a number of stakeholders and then issue a formal report to the governor and the General Assembly with recommendations. Our guardianship code is fairly old and scattered, so having it be kind of modernized is a good thing, but it will also be an opportunity for advocacy to ensure that advocates and other interested individuals can have input on what those guardianship laws look like. SB 71 also does a lot of updates to the Indiana Uniform Transfers to Minors Act, adding some flexibility and giving the court some oversight tools. So it does. There's also some technical corrections and changes with regard to trusts and power of attorney. So again, for our purposes, it is a very applicable law, but it's interestingly enough getting a hearing today, right after upon adjournment of when the Senate session ends. So that's beginning to move. And so that's something that we will pay attention to. After they're done on Friday, they're going to have a break, and then they're going to come back as originally planned on January 5th. So that'll really be the kickoff of the session. You know, this is already going to be a short session. If you're unfamiliar, every other year is a long session, which means every other year is a short session. The long sessions are our budget years. Our short sessions, they don't consider the budget, which makes it a little shorter. We don't know what to expect. We think it's going to be very short. They're going to supposedly take these 2 weeks that they were here and pull it off the back end. So probably toward the end of February end date, and they're starting in January 5th. What does that look like? Does that give you 3 committee hearings for each committee? We're not really sure. So, it'd be interesting to see how many bills move through and how many don't move through. Certainly with the budget year, a non-budget year, it's going to be shorter, but certainly with these few redistricting weeks in December, it's going to be even shorter. So certainly that policy window of actually what they're going to take up and even attempt to move forward through committees is certainly going to be limited, really even more limited than others. We're really taking the temperature, seeing what happens. Like I said at the beginning, I think that redistricting is going to dominate the entire session. It's certainly going to dominate these first 2 weeks, but even after that, we're not really sure what's going to happen and how these discussions and this proposed bill and action is going to impact everything else. As I'm sure you're well aware in the news, legislators getting threatened with primaries. If they would not have had primaries, if they're voting against redistricting, really there's threats going back both ways. And so is that going to influence legislative behavior? I don't know. And it's something that we're really going to have to pay attention to. What we do know for sure is extraordinary, very political discussions that are happening now. And it's really just going to be, okay, how's this going to affect the session? But time will tell. I think the coming days will be extraordinarily educational to see kind of where the Senate falls on this topic. Leader Bray has indicated constantly that the Senate doesn't have the votes, and that's why he wasn't going to call them into session. And then he ended up calling them into session for this Monday. Does the Senate have the votes, or is he just saying, hey, I told you I didn't have the votes, and we're going to let the Senate vote on it to show you we don't have the votes? I don't know. I think there's betting odds going both ways. So time will tell. If you're at all interested in this or political science or how the system works, and you can always stream these hearings, every hearing, on the IGA website. So if you have an interest and you cannot get down to the State House, and sometimes you frankly just don't want to come down to the State House, certainly iga.in.gov streams all of these sessions and all the committee hearings as well. So it's very educational and sometimes entertaining if you're interested in that. So with that, that's my legislative session update, non-update. Not sure what's going to happen, but that's where we are as it stands on December 9th. And things will move and things change from minute to minute and hour to hour. So we'll continue to move forward and see what happens this week. And then as they come back in January 5th, obviously we're going to be planning for a very short, quick session. The next thing I wanted to touch on is some Arc of Indiana bills and the agenda that we have going into this session. Every year, the Arc of Indiana adopts a public policy agenda that chiefly has sections on Medicaid, employment, and education, really the areas that largely impact individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities or individuals with disabilities as a whole. And that's certainly not unique to this year. So our board of directors actually approved our public policy agenda just this last Friday. So that's posted on our website. And we are planning, as it again stands on December 9th, things change from day to day. We're planning for 3 ARC-centric bills that we're going to put a lot of effort and advocacy into. And then there's another bill that I'll touch on at the very end that we're certainly going to support the author and trying to push forward because we do believe in the end result of it. So just to walk through some of our bills, give you a kind of spotlight. One of them is currently filed. We're anticipating the next one to be filed by the end of this week. And the other ones are kind of TBD, but certainly soon because the filing deadline is coming. The first one to go over, and I'll spend probably most time on this one, is it's House Bill 1012. So if you're at all familiar with numbers, we got in there very quickly this year. Representative Clear, I think, was probably at the door when they opened and got the 1012 number, which is nice and unique. And so LSA, the Legislative Services Agency, names their bills for the topic area. They call it Medicaid Matters. we call it our Medicaid Transparency, Accountability, and Stewardship Bill. I like my name a lot better than Medicaid Matters, but I'm not the one who names it. So really the purpose of 1012, it does a lot of things. I'm going to really key on 4 main things. 3 kind of interested parties and responsibilities for those three parties, and then a last kind of unique idea from a trying to find funding opportunities for needed services. HB 1012, really the key here is to strengthen transparency, accountability, and shared responsibility in Indiana's HCBS, or Homeland Community-Based Services system. We have heard, certainly for years, but especially in this last summer, how many changes. And if you were in our last our last session that was kind of going over the Medicaid changes last Tuesday, there are a lot of changes coming down, right? Both from the federal level and the state level, but a lot of them impact Medicaid. A lot of them impact the funding availability of Medicaid, especially from a state financing standpoint, as it relates to provider tax, et cetera. So the one thing we do know coming out of this is that the current version of Indiana Medicaid, as it applies to people with disabilities, or really Medicaid as a whole, is not going to look the same. Changes are going to happen. We're just not sure what those changes will be yet. We can certainly get a sense of them, and we certainly are going to be advocating behind and before decisions are made to really kind of get input on there. But we do know the changes are going to be made. So we know that there will be less federal dollars coming into the state to fund Medicaid. With that, changes need to happen. There are three levers that the state can pull. There's an eligibility lever, there's a rate lever, and there's a services lever. Likely they're going to have to pull at least one, if not more, of those levers and change how those work right now. In light of that, we're wanting to put forward this bill and to really help us add more transparency to the system, add accountability to the system, and be able to inform those really needed and important decisions as we move forward. So, this is ensuring the bill as a whole that individuals with disabilities, their families, providers, and the state each play a defined role in really safeguarding the Medicaid program integrity, quality, and person-centered outcomes. And that's where we really need to focus on and key on, and keeping the focus on that, not on dollars necessarily, not on other things, but really person-centered outcomes for the people who utilize it. So again, three parties here, kind of the state, providers, and then the individuals and families that are utilizing Medicaid. So the first component under state transparency is really the goal is increasing visibility in the Medicaid waiver spend, service delivery, and outcome quality outcomes. So what this would do, as it, I just described and Rachel described kind of how a bill becomes a law. So at every stage of these things, not only can it die, but it can change and be amended. But as it's introduced, HB 1012 would require the state to provide a monthly statement to the individual receiving HCBS services that includes the state contribution amount of the service provided, so we know what the state is spending on the individual and the individual knows. And then if the individual was denied for any services, the reason for denial. It also specifically details that if FSSA determines that an individual is ineligible for Medicaid, they must provide the specific reason for determining ineligibility. I know that sounds like it's ridiculous because certainly that's happening, but it is not. When an individual is found to be ineligible for Medicaid, they get the denial, but they don't know why. They get an appeal right, and sometimes they show up to the administrative appeal and say, I don't know what I'm arguing against, and that's a problem. Sometimes this is an administrative fix that could not require the time and resources that an administrative appeal takes, but we don't know that. So having FSA deny the specific reason for denial, I think is key and important. Next, it requires them FSA to publish for the preceding year the amount of state dollars that were budgeted for and spent under each of the waivers, and also the amount that providers billed for each service under each waiver. So again, really transparency and guiding our decisions, especially as we look at getting into a waiver reset and the state really reworking our whole HCBS system. Knowing what services are utilized and how much is being billed is going to be educational and allow really us, the advocacy network, as well as really stakeholders and decision makers to make informed decisions. So that'll really be important. Additionally, in that publishing annual, we're publishing comparative data on providers, including quality measures, accreditation, and incident reports and rates. Just so again, keying in on some quality of services and getting that transparency to the individuals that utilize the services best. The next section under still state state transparency and responsibility is probably amongst my favorite of this section. So even if this bill does not bode well in the session, I'm really hoping that this can move forward because this is a very, very needed change. And that's a redesign of the pick list. If anybody has ever received, authorization for services and has been given a 10, 30, 100, 200 page document of saying all the available providers for you to pick from, and it's literally just a list and phone numbers, you know how bad the pick list is. And so what this would require is the state to redesign the pick list, make it electronically searchable, make it consumer friendly, only display information about providers accepting new individuals in the geographic area that they're interested in, and include provider accreditation and performance data, including results of provider satisfaction survey, allowing the individuals to make informed decisions about the services that they're going to sign up for. So again, this is a long overdue need, but redesigning the pick list, the list of service providers will be an important one. Next, the state already publishes waitlist data, but we want a little more detail. They usually include the slots released each month, how many accepted and declined or rescinded. We want the reason for denial or rescission. Why are these people being denied, or why are why is the invite being rescinded? Is the individual moving out of state? Has the individual passed away while waiting for waiver services? Were they required to go into an institution and no longer are eligible for waiver services? Some of that, again, just from a full transparency standpoint, being educational and telling the community, telling the public what those reasons are, extraordinarily helpful. The last one for the state transparency requirement section, review the criteria and process for approving, monitoring, and removing providers, including providers that mismanage funds or have consistently high incident rates. Again, the goal here is high quality services. There are, especially over the last several years, a lot of providers in Indiana. And there are some very, very good ones, and there are some very, very bad ones. And we want the state to have the ability to be able to monitor and remove bad providers and making sure that the services are quality. So moving on to the second component here is really the provider accountability section. And this is promoting transparency in provider services and responsible use of Medicaid funds. Really three main things that this does from a provider standpoint, responsibility standpoint. Already required is that service coordination include the development of an individual service plan to address the individual's needs. I'm sure if anybody has routed through this and these services in HCBS, we know the ISP, right? The individual service plan. What we're wanting the state to do is establish a procedure for documenting compliance with the ISP, and also including a provider attestation that the services delivered under the plan align with the plan. We're wanting to make sure that services that are being provided by the providers are for the individual needs and are person-centered. Again, there are really a lot of really good providers out there, and a lot of providers are certainly doing this. We have some providers who are not. And over the summer, we've heard situations where individuals would say, well, I'm only receiving X amount of, 5 hours of this service, only to find out they're actually receiving 11 hours being billed. And so having that information and having the provider attest that what they're providing is centered on the ISP and their individual needs, I think is important. Additionally, not later than 15 days before a case management meeting, a care coordination meeting, the service provider must provide to the case manager or the care coordinator their billing records of the recipient. Again, going toward that transparency and accountability, making sure the individual recipient knows what the provider is billing for the services they're receiving, and then similarly biannually provide the individual with an itemized statement of services billed by the provider in plain language. So again, education, being informed, being transparent about what services are being provided. The third component, before I get the interesting funding idea, is really the individual and family good stewardship aspect of this. We're at the Arc of Indiana, we're in full alignment and agreement that if individuals receive state or federal funds and services through state and federally funded programs, they should be good stewards of those funds, and really foster responsible participation and shared accountability amongst families and the individual recipients who are receiving them. So, we talked about these requirements for these billing statements, and really the educational statements on what's being billed and the itemized statement of services. There's a responsibility for the individuals to review those and report any errors or inconsistencies so that they can be corrected and rectified. So there's a responsibility for all individuals in the system, and hopefully we can really move to the last several years, whether appropriate or not, we have a lot of individuals who have the philosophy under the HCBS system of maximizing the budget, right? You have a certain amount budgeted. What can we do to absolutely maximize the budget, with the rightfully concerned, especially the last several years, that if they don't, they might lose that additional money the following year. First of all, that does not happen. It should not happen. So, if you're spending less than what's budgeted, the next year you again should be assessing your needs and you have the same amount of money available. But what we need is individuals and service providers and case managers to receive the services that are needed, not the ones for a rainy day or the concern down the line, but what does the individual need and what's person-centered now? And really, again, being good stewardships of the money. I say that because the last aspect of this bill is a unique aspect, but what we're calling it is the HCBS Home and Community-Based Services Waiver Waiting List Assistant Fund. And what this will do is take appropriations that are already been budgeted for HCBS services that remain unexpended and unencumbered at the close of the fiscal year. And instead of reverting those back, they would revert and be deposited into this fund, this Waiver List Assistance Fund. We are all well aware of the waiting list in Indiana for Medicaid services. These are individuals who are needing waiver services who might now be years off of receiving a waiver. There are needs there. If we can take money that has already been budgeted, and take that money and put it into a fund that is really established for individuals on the waiting list to access supports that might promote stability, readiness, or crisis prevention, that's a good thing, right? If we can help alleviate some need while they're on the waiting list, whether it be caregiver or individual training, assistive technology or adaptive equipment, short-term stabilization, care coordination, or case management planning, something that might assist in promoting stability, readiness, and crisis prevention, that's a good thing. And so that's what this bill would do, is it would take whatever is been budgeted already, but not spent, because again, we're only getting based on needs and not maximizing a budget. That money would revert to this assistance fund, and be there and available for at least these one-off purchases to help an individual who is on the waiting list. The treasurer would have responsibility to invest the money and oversee the money like they would any other state fund. So I know it's a lot, but that's HB House Bill 1012. We're excited about it. We think that there's a lot of really good pieces in here and a lot of pieces that have been needed for a while. But we do think that the system as a whole will be better, and the individuals, the families, the stakeholders, the advocates will be better informed to make informed decisions with this bill. So that has already been sent to Public Health for the House. We'll see in January about a hearing. It's certainly not going to be in December. Representative Clear, Representative Goss Reeves, Representative Garcia Wilburn, and Representative Cash are the four representatives on the bill. But we're as we're having conversations, certainly everyone we've met with from a legislative standpoint is in favor and excited about the bill. So we're excited to see where that goes. The next bill, I just again have three more. The next three are not going to be nearly as long as that, I promise. The next one really came out of the ABA work group As you're probably aware, especially if you utilize ABA services, last January, the outgoing administration placed a retroactive cap on ABA services. So if you had hit 3 years of services, you were done. You were just kind of off a cliff. You didn't have any available ABA services. Very quickly, advocacy happened. I got to credit Representative Green for his strong advocacy. Governor Braun issued an executive order that changed this, changed the retroactive cap, made sure people wouldn't be falling off an ABA cliff there, and really created a work group for individuals and stakeholders and families and providers to really discuss the needs of the system. We do know and recognize that the costs for ABA therapy have skyrocketed over the last several years, and really it wasn't sustainable. So we needed to look at changes that were appropriate for the system and for the individuals. Certainly 100% a retroactive cap is not it. And so this work group met over the summer, issued their final report, and this is a bill coming out of that report. What was key on this bill, it's really kind of an ABA in schools bill. And so what we heard over and over again is that when individual students are transitioning from ABA therapy in the community back into the schools, that transition is extraordinarily difficult. They probably have a board certified behavior analyst or an RBT in the community that they're working with. And they're getting ready to get back to school, but as soon as they get to school, they stop receiving any kind of ABA therapy, and that's a hard transition. And so what this bill, in short, would say, if a student is receiving ABA therapy from a licensed and board certified behavior analyst, it also mentions RBTs in those situations as needed. ABA services are included in IEP and 504 plan at the school. If so, then the school will be required upon the request to allow that BCBA or RBT to provide those services in the school setting for the purpose of helping that student transition back into school services. So it's pretty explicit in there being transitional, not less than 30 days, with exceptions not more than 90 days. So really that short-term transition to help an individual student kind of transition back into appropriate educational services at that point. We've had a lot of discussions with school council and other individuals who to kind of see what concerns they might have from this standpoint. So we've attempted to address a lot of these issues. The last update language I saw this morning, I think it's almost ready. We anticipate the bill to be filed by Friday. But some of those safeguards that we saw from, especially kind of raised by school council, civil immunity for actions taken in good faith to comply with the statute, a clarification that the IEP does not need to specifically name the BCBA or the RBT by name. There's a concern there that if an individual is named by name, and maybe they're sick or they were absent, then that may trigger an IEP violation. And we certainly don't want that. So there's not a requirement that they actually name the individual in the IEP. There's a mandatory expanded criminal history, child protection index checks like anybody would providing services in a school. There are clear limits on school financial responsibility. So nothing in the bill would require a school to employ, contract with, or pay the BCBA. The cost of those services remain the responsibility of the parent or the parent's insurer. And then specifically in the code, the services being provided under this chapter would still continue to be characterized as clinical or therapeutic for insurance or third-party reimbursement purposes. And then finally, there'd be a requirement for the Department of Education to prepare and distribute some guidance to schools on how they can best comply with this. So again, coming out of the ABA work group, addressing that concern about kind of, that transitional period where an individual begins school and the schools can sometimes be reluctant to continue the ABA or allow an outside BCBA into the school. This really goes to address that. And hopefully we've, threaded the needle and kind of balancing act on all the interested parties. But we'll see as we get to committee hearings and get some testimony. So that's the second one. The third ARC bill that we have involves, oddly enough, the death penalty. I know that seems odd, but we are staying in our lane, certainly as it relates to the death penalty. It has long been the policy of the state of Indiana to not subject people with intellectual disability to the death penalty. This has been on the books since the early 90s. I think it was 93, 94. There were some United States Supreme Court cases that have kind of pushed that change as well. But if an individual has been identified as having an intellectual disability, then they are not subject to the death penalty. I want to caution here and just highlight, this is not a get out of jail free card. The individual will spend, if convicted, their remaining life in prison, but they just will not be subject to the death penalty. The way that a statute is drafted now is that an individual and their counsel has to raise this 20 days before the initial pretrial on the criminal trial. And if they miss that deadline, for whatever reason, they've missed their opportunity to raise this. We think that's a problem. There may be a variety of reasons that the counsel doesn't know the individual might have an intellectual disability or the need to have them evaluated for intellectual disability. And if they miss that deadline, really the only option the individual has is what's called an ineffective counsel argument, which is an extraordinarily high bar, but they can't argue that they're an individual with an intellectual disability and therefore this statute applies. We're trying to work through that. There are a couple different options right now that we're still trying to finalize here on December 9th on how best to address that, whether it be an automatic at trial or if it's a allowance to raise it one time at any point in the proceedings. Again, we're still working through the logistics of how to accomplish that goal, but the goal is not a policy expansion. The policy of the state is already to not subject individuals with intellectual disability to the death penalty. We're wanting to make sure that is actually happening. And that if an individual doesn't have an arbitrary deadline to kind of miss a date and therefore wouldn't get those protections. So we're trying to just fix that issue. Again, not a policy expansion, just making sure that in practice, the policy that's already been on the books for a long time is actually how it works. The last bill, and this is not an ARC-centric bill nor an ARC bill, but again, I mentioned earlier, we're going to assist Representative Green in kind of what he needs from this. It's an international money wiring fee bill. I know that sounds odd as well. The last two bills have been odd. So what this would do, going back to, there are some drastic financial constraints on the Medicaid program, both at the federal level and the state level. So people are finding ways or attempting to find ways to fund it. The needs aren't going down, but the money is. And so, kind of to address that, we're going to touch on what rates, eligibility, or services, more money would help. And so Representative Green had a unique idea here as it relates to international money wires, that on any money that is internationally wired, there would be a 3% fee on that money. There would be a tax credit for some that would come back, and for what remains, it would be reverted to a fund to supplement Medicaid HCBS services. So it would be a dedicated fund that what money is raised from this bill, it would go into pay and assist with HCBS Medicaid funds, hence the ARC of Indiana's assistance on this bill. Certainly that would be helpful. The estimates right now, they're not 100% clear, but the estimates are anywhere from $19.7 million to $60 million a year. It's a lot of money. This is not, while it's a unique and kind of thinking outside the box idea, it is not new. Some states have already adopted it. Oklahoma has it on the books. They have a 1% fee. And while the data that we have is a little dated, a couple years old, their 1% fee a couple years ago raised $13.1 million. So it's unique. It hasn't been filed yet. We anticipate it being filed soon. But again, we're going to assist Representative Green on his needs here because we do think the end result would be helpful to the individuals we serve and having that bucket of money that otherwise wouldn't be there. Certainly, there's multiple risks. Rachel's gone through the process of bills. Our system was created to not pass bills. Let's just be honest here. That's how our system has created. That's why we have so many committee hearings and third readings and second readings and amendments and all these votes. It's really set up that once bills get on, it's not easy to undo. Well, that also means that it's hard to get bills on. And so there are a lot of steps to go through here. But the other risk relative to this bill is that, Medicaid's not the only financial need in the state of Indiana. So I think as other legislators see a potential pot of between 20 and $60 million potentially, they may say, oh, no, I think that money we better served here and not Medicaid or not HCBS. So that's certainly a risk that we're going to pay attention to. But it's a unique, and I like Representative Green thinking outside the box, and we're certainly going to assist him on pushing that forward. So I know that was extraordinarily long-winded. I hope that at least you have some idea about kind of where the session is, because who knows? But as the lease stands on today, on December 9th. And then those are going to be, as you pay attention to kind of the Arc of Indiana in our public policy advocacy, those are really going to be the bills that we are strongly in support of and advocating for. Certainly as the session starts on now through, back on January 5th, there are going to be other things, and we're going to be kind of reactionary and probably supportive in defending some things as they come about too. So certainly this isn't all we're going to be doing during the session. Just as a highlight too, and I think we may mention it at the end, but all of our organizations have really good communication and getting information out. The Arc of Indiana has a legislative update that we send every Friday during session. And I'm not saying this because I draft it, but it is very good. And so what it tries to do is the bills that are applicable to our population and our advocacy work, we try to dig deep and keep everyone updated about where they are and really a need for advocacy and a need for voice, which is absolutely essential throughout the legislative session. So if you're not currently signed up for our legislative session updates, I would strongly encourage you to do so, because we try to do a good job of informing others, but also leaning on you all and really showing up with your testimony and your outreaches to your legislators, which are really, really important. So with that, Macy, I think I'm going to pass it over to you.
Sounds great. Thank you so much. And thank you for laying out the current session updates. I know there's a lot going on, and also the public policy agenda for 2026 looking ahead. So this work, as Tom was talking about, all of these bills that we're looking at and that are being proposed, but also just in general, what the session will look like. This work can't be done alone. All of our collective organizations on this call have a hand in this important work, but it's you on this call that are listening that can help tip the scales for these legislators. They want to know what their constituents want to see changed, what their constituents want to see impacted. Your voice not only matters, it can give representatives and their teams really a new perspective and understanding of the systems and where they're failing and where they're succeeding and helping families, and maybe how some of these bills can even further help and assist them through these systems. Systems such as Medicaid and home and community-based services, they're complex. And, by you sharing how you utilize these services and how you really can rely on certain aspects, they can give decision makers a new perspective. I've had a lot of conversations with legislators where their eyes are open and their ears are wide. Just they want to know all of the things that our families rely on, what touches them in their life, to where that they can make those decisions further in the future. To take one of Tom's bills, for example, I think that for ABA, if you have an experience with an ABA provider where they may have been denied in the schools, talk to your legislator about that. Explain the importance of some of these bills that are going to be coming on the docket, because I think that gives them that impact story where then when they hear that, they remember your story and it can tie it back to you. As the 2026 session does gear up, there are a few key ways to stay engaged and connect with advocacy groups. I was going to plug, Tom, the Arc of Indiana's newsletter, but I will really bolster it again. This is a great newsletter to stay connected with. As you've heard from Rachel and Tom, the process can take a while, and there are a lot of different things, maybe there's an amendment that comes up, so it shifts language a little bit, and it impacts how a bill will be then read and influenced. And so I think it's really important to stay up to date on how bills are amended, where they are in committee, or if they've been passed. So you can also know where to set your advocacy perspectives and where to really put your meaningful advocacy, because we know that time is limited. You don't have hours and hours to look up bills, see where they're at, trying to think, who should I reach out to first and talk about this bill? So the Arc of Indiana's newsletter is a great place to really stay organized with that and know what's coming up. I know a lot of our organizations as well have different communications, whether you're more of a social media person. I know that the ARC of Indiana does do a really great job on really updating the people who follow their Facebook and their Instagram on what's going on too at the State House when there may be an action alert. Down Syndrome Indiana also does that, and I think of other organizations will do that on here on occasion as well. And so I really encourage, if you're more of a social media person too, to follow social media pages as well to get those action alerts. Sometimes we don't know a bill is going to be read until the night before or the day before. And so that's when those timely action alerts can be really helpful for your advocacy. And then also, I like to always plug, I think one of the hardest things that when I first got into advocacy that I was navigating is, where can I find out what's happening? I think that there's a lot of places that we can find news and find different things, but I wanted something that was very local based, that I could see how things are moving and how things are happening at more of a, I guess, a larger level. So I always like to plug the Capitol Chronicle, which is something that you can get to your email, and it's a news source that you can also stay apprised. There's a lot of policy information that comes out of that as well. But that's a great way to get information and stay up to date as well, because I really do believe in this specific work. Knowledge is power, and the more that you know and you have heads up, or you can see what's coming, that you can better prepare yourself as an advocate to do this work ahead of the whether it's a bill being read or ahead of the session as a whole. And then the next way that I'm going to talk about how you can share your voice is speaking to your elected official. We're in a really unique place right now, obviously. It's usually, I will say, the legislators aren't that busy. They're kind of gearing up for things right now. So it's a great time to reach out. But I would say ahead of the 2026 session starting, I would still reach out now. The sooner the better. Introduce yourself. Maybe share a personal story or share your tie to an issue that matters to you. Maybe knowing now, as Tom was saying, some of the bills that are coming up, maybe tie some of your story with the bill's mission or some of the focus too as well. Really just resonating with your story and you being the expert on your story. I think that's a great place to start. Ask for a meeting. It's always good to set a foundation now. So when you're asking for their support or flagging something that they should be aware of, you have an established rapport already. This relationship can lead to good communication outside the session. Maybe every year on the off time session when they're back in their district, you can have coffee with them, have lunch, talk about maybe things that are going on in your life that, maybe it inspires them to do a bill later on that where you're talking about your story and they're flagging an issue that might be reoccurring. So I really encourage you to start that relationship now, build that rapport, and share your story. Always continue to reach out if they, maybe one of the bills that Tom was talking about, they voted yes. Send them an email, say thank you so much for supporting that. It really means a lot to me and my story and my family. And really try to follow where their decisions are lying, because I think that'll make a really great relationship long term. But I know from personal experience, it can be overwhelming to navigate that process. I would always like to include this if I can, if there's a spot in one of our speaking engagements, because I think it's really important that the resources that are available to you to where you can find your legislator. So this next slide really offers you a guide in the process to how easy it is. So the first link, when it says visit on IGA, you can find your legislator. So it's as easy as just typing in your address, and what will pull up is your representatives. And it'll also show, I believe, districts. As you can click over and find, you can kind of interact on the page. It'll tell you where your current district is. There could be changes throughout that process, as you may have heard, but it'll say where your current district is. And then you can also click on your representatives. As you click on your representatives, you can also find maybe what committees they're on. And that can be really helpful too, as you look through the process on the ARC of Indiana's newsletter or other sources. If you see one of the bills that are being heard in a certain committee that perhaps your legislator's on, that's a great time to reach out as well. So that's a really great place to start to really do some initial research and initial understanding When I first got started, I wrote down, who my representatives are, and I put under them which committees that they were assigned to. And that really helped me just keep kind of apprised of that. And if I heard, oh, that committee, that's going to go in that committee, I was able to email them really quickly and just talk a little bit about my story and where that issue is really meaningful to me. So it made that lift a little bit easier when it became time. But overall, as I mentioned, your story really does matter. You're the expert on your own lived experience, and lean on us as organizations to help you through this process. That's what we're here for. That's what we love to do, is to connect and to ensure that your voice is being heard and you have a seat at the table. And so we would love to help you do that and empower everyone to have a voice in this work, because that's what matters. I think now Mike can lead us through discussion and questions.
Yeah, thank you, Macy. I appreciate that, and really appreciate that message on there too. And I would just add to that, I know things can seem kind of overwhelming, and there's a lot of changes. The session's moving fast, so just remember to take a little time for self-care and that for yourself too as we go through these tricky times. And then with that, we're going to start with the Q&A. So I will start at the top, and we will go through the questions from there. If you guys have other questions, or if this spurs other thoughts, just type those into the Q&A, and we will get to them kind of as we get to that part of the session. So thanks again. Our first question is, help me understand, why do bills need several readings to pass?
That's a great question. I think a lot of it, we're seeing a very unique situation. As Tom said, things are moving really quickly right now. But a lot of times there are questions that are in these readings. There are amendments. The process can look really different for every bill that's coming across. But really, this is what our system, how it was formed and how it was made. As Tom said, it wasn't, it takes a lot for a bill. I don't know the percentage and statistics Tom may know, but, not a lot of bills end up making it to the finish line. So it really does go through this process to have discussion so legislators can ask questions, make changes, and then hopefully at the end they all come to an agreement and that there's a solidified plan. But that's just how our system was made, and that's how the process has gone for many, many years.
All right, thanks, Macy. And then our next question is, if passed, how will the redistricting affect Medicaid waivers in Indiana?
So I'll take that. It's not going to be a direct impact, certainly, on Medicaid waivers directly. Just to answer Macy's question, I was trying to see if I had this data. Last year, it's about 20% on passage rate on bills introduced in the House versus in the Senate, and how they've made it through the system. So 1 in 5 make it through the system after they bring it introduced. So just give you some data. Yeah, the redistricting won't necessarily impact. I mean, there's no direct impact on Medicaid waivers in Indiana. I'm not going to get into the discussion on representation in the different districts and the legislators. I mean, certainly legislators could change based on the new district. So, maybe having an unknown legislator may have some impact on some federal Medicaid decisions, but it's so, questionable and non-exact. You can't even assume that. I think one of the bigger risks that I want to mention is that, there have been some fairly explicit comments made from the federal administration to Indiana legislators that if redistricting does not pass, then some of the things that are currently sitting at the feds to approve from a waiver standpoint or a grandfathering standpoint, one, for instance, I'm not going to get into, we talked about last week, the provider tax and how the state funds its piece of the Medicaid pie. There are going to be changes that are made in OB3 and HR1, the one big beautiful bill, on the allowances for states to do that. The Indiana has sent to the feds a request to grandfather in and kind of push out that runway for Indiana. There's been some pretty overt comments made that if redistricting does not happen, then some of those approvals will not happen at the federal level. So I think from a flip side, if redistricting, that's something to pay attention to. What impact will that have? I don't know. And we'll, obviously time will tell. on both. But directly to your question, redistricting itself will not have a direct impact on Medicaid waivers in Indiana.
All right, thanks, Tom. Then we had a couple of points about some technical suggestions for future meetings, so that's great. We will take those into advisement. Appreciate that. And then our next question is if our legislators ask, how will House Bill 1012 be paid for?
A good question. So the bulk of the money. So this is something we're going to have to kind of deal with, I think, as the bill moves through the session, right? There's going to be a fiscal attached to it, and the fiscal is going to be attached to it because of some of the changes that we're asking the state to do from a statement standpoint or from a systems communication standpoint. As it relates to the kind of the flex fund, that should not cost anything else, right? Because it's money that's already been budgeted and not utilized or encumbered, so it moves over to this fund to help people. But certainly, I do think there's going to be a fiscal. We're actually waiting for it. I was told it was going to be last Friday and it's not here yet. So we're still waiting on the updated fiscal for 1012 on how much it's going to cost. I don't think it's fair for the entire of what I'm anticipating the fiscal to be pushed on to 1012. We're hearing from FSA, we're hearing from DDARS that they're wanting to do a lot of these things already, right? And they are planning to do some of these things. The systems don't talk well in Indiana, whether it be, say, the HCBS waiver side and the Medicaid medical spend. Those are two keys that should talk to each other so we can get a full informed picture on, for instance, Medicaid spend on an individual. So some of these changes the state's already talking about making. What it will cost, I don't know. How will we pay for it? I still don't know. So I don't have a good answer for you. But we do recognize there's going to be a fiscal, and we need to figure out a way to say, well, this is something you're already doing, or try to shift some other money elsewhere. Because at the end of the day, from a legislative standpoint, one of the biggest concerns they have fiscally is the Medicaid spend. It is a giant, giant piece of the pie. And we truly think that this bill will shed light and provide the needed transparency and accountability that will have the system operate better and really shed light to allow individuals, including them, legislators, making better informed decisions. So we do think that as a whole, the system will be better for it. So even if it does cost something, we do think it's worthwhile.
Great. Thanks, Tom. Our next question is, can you please tell us again the title of the bill regarding ABA services?
It doesn't have a title yet. It's not filed. I'll have a title for you on Friday. And, back to it. If you register for our legislative updates, it will certainly be in there. But it'll be something very generic on, ABAs in schools or educational matters or something like that. So that's one failure of our legislative system. We don't get fun bill names. But I don't see a change happening soon. So, but no, we don't have a number yet. We don't have a title yet. But certainly we'll send that out when it is filed.
Great, thank you. And then is House Bill 1012 the only one filed so far?
Yes, it is. We recognize we have a December 15th deadline for filing. We have a December 12th deadline to get requests of language into LSA. Legislators do at least. So it's coming tight, but we're continuing to work, and we are hearing like I said, I saw an updated version of the ABA bill this morning. I think by Friday that will be filed. The other two, I don't have details yet.
All right. Thanks, Tom. And then can providers access the waiting list?
I'm
not sure in what context, I guess. Rachel, do you
well, I was going to ask that too. So you can find on the waiting list if you're on the waiting list, but not what spot you're on the waiting list. So if I have applied for a waiver, I can go on and check to see if I'm on the waiting list, but not where I am at on the waiting list. And anybody, if you've applied, you can see that, but not everybody gets to see the names on the waiting list.
And there are updates that occasionally go out in terms of, for example, right now they're saying not until July of 26 will there be any more that we're going to be off the wait list, for example, for family support and CIH. So they do come out with some alerts too that you can keep up with as well to talk about, where they are in systems.
And there has been announcements of like when they're targeting which months when you applied. So like if you applied in like December 2023, they would say we're targeting that month. In history, that's what they've done. I don't know what they're going to do in the future, but in the past, they've been saying, well, this is the month we're currently targeting. Every once in a while, they'll give those updates.
Great. Thanks, everybody. And then our next question says, I have a 30-year-old daughter with dual diagnosis of DS and ASD and ended up having a long, hard time, years even, before I could obtain needed services. I am now knowledgeable, but many missed benefits along the way. I am an attorney, also a psychiatric nurse practitioner. I have a daughter who is an ABA therapist and another who is a speech therapist, all because of our daughter. I want to know how I can help, how I can give our story or those of others whom I know in any way needed.
No, that's a great question. And it really brings back to connecting with organizations like Down Syndrome Indiana, like the ARC of Indiana, and sharing your story and sharing that you're interested in advocacy is a really great first step. I know that when we have potential bills that are going to be read and testimonies needed, by knowing your story, we can call you up and let you know about these opportunities, and really ensure that you're given that platform to share your story. There are also, by subscribing to the ARC of Indiana newsletter as well, for example, in this case, Down Syndrome Indiana, we have opportunities as well for State Health Days and other things too, where you can engage not only yourself, but your entire family. It sounds like you have a great support system and a lot of people who are in your corner. So, those are kind of the more larger things. But I would say by every day, sharing your story with whoever would listen, whether that's, your local like city council members or even your legislators, I think developing those relationships now are going to be great. I think really we're seeing a time where that's not only important, it's essential. And so I really encourage you to reach out to organizations like us and connect and make sure that we can have you on the docket. So when we get these opportunities, we can really highlight that.
And I'll just add thank you. I think we've been talking all summer and for years about individuals telling their stories. I mean, certainly you have the lived experience, but also the professional experience that is extraordinarily valuable and helpful. So, having that desire to help and share your story and educate is exactly what we're looking for. And so I appreciate it.
Great. Thank you both. The next question is Senate Bill 71 appears to be a probate bill. Does this task force go any further into how guardians should be accountable to courts on a regular basis, similar to how the volunteer advocates for senior incapacitated adults or the VASIA? Also, we need legislation for how youth are addressed with other alternative guardianships.
Yeah, I'll take this. So I'm going to give you a strong caveat here that I have not dug deep into this bill yet. I know the advocates who are behind the bill and the drafting of the bill. I trust them a lot, and this is a good thing, a good change. Yes, I do think that those type of questions are going to dig into from what the Guardianship Code Revision Task Force is going to dig into. I think all of that is yes. I think they're going to look at the system as a whole, how it operates, the accountability, et cetera, et cetera. As it relates to youth, it does have specific changes in, like, for instance, I'm not going to get into all the details, but the allowance for a person who owes money to a minor is the transfer allowance is raised to $25,000 without a court order. That will eliminate the need for unnecessary guardianship filings, right? Sometimes there are people who are getting guardianship filings to kind of facilitate something like that. So that's the spirit of what's happening, I think, is that I think they're going to be looking at appropriate alternatives to guardianship, supporting decision-making when they can and appropriate, looking at court oversight. So I think all of that will happen with the task force. And I'm excited because I think it's overdue and needed. But there's just to kind of give you a sense of as it stands right now, there's legislative members that are going to be on the task force. I think 4 of them, a representative of a AAA, a representative of the Indiana Supreme Court's Adult Guardianship Office, 2 attorneys who either practice guardianship or elder law, a VASIA representative, a probate court judge, and a representative from Indiana Disability Rights. So really good key stakeholders and knowledgeable individuals who can take a look at our current guardianship code and really make the recommendations that are needed to make it better.
Great. Thank you, Tom. Then our next two questions are kind of together, so we'll put those together. How reasonable is legalizing marijuana in Indiana to use the tax revenue to fund our state health initiatives, such as our waiver programs? And the second part of that is, in addition to my marijuana revenue question, states doing such raise in the hundreds of millions in tax revenue each year.
Either of you want to take that? I think that's a policy decision. I mean, I think the funding sources that legislators tap into, whether it be legalize marijuana, the cigarette tax, the road tax, the all of those are policy decision that Ways and Means and Appropriations and the Senate and the House of a whole have to evaluate and determine what's best to utilize.
All right, thanks, Tom. And that's the last of the submitted questions so far. We have a couple of closing slides to get through. If you have questions before we get to the end, go ahead and put those in the Q&A and I'll come back to them before we wrap up. And so we do want to leave people with some resource and takeaway materials. So for all of our organizations, first, the ARC has some advocacy resources, and they've prepared some correspondence materials, including some contact information for elected officials, templates for introduction letters, and guides for effective advocacy communication. Then the Autism Society of Indiana, where you can stay engaged with regular webinars, training sessions, and advocacy events. They'll keep you informed about legislative sessions and key advocacy moments. And then from Down Syndrome Indiana, they have ongoing support, and they want to let you know that you're not alone in this advocacy journey, and they're here to provide ongoing support, answer questions, and help you to connect with other advocates in your area. And then from us, from the Indiana Statewide Independent Living Council, from INSILC, we have a survey that we'd like you to take at the end of this training. It'll pop up when you close out of your Zoom. It's a way for you to let us know about the needs in your community and also the demographics of the folks who have attended this webinar. That will help us as we're working on our current strategic plan, and it will also help us as we begin to write our next 3-year strategic plan that we will start in earnest in 2026. So we would ask you to take that survey at the end of this webinar. And then our last upcoming event, we're all going to be at a day at the State House, and that's going to be on January 29th of 2026 from 9 to 2 p.m. We're still putting the kind of details in that together, but if you follow us on our social channels, you can do that and you can see kind of up-to-date information as we get closer to that event. So please do that. And then we had one other question come into the Q&A as I was reading through those last slides. And that question was, in the meantime, what do families do while waiting for their loved one's name to be moved onto the waiver waiting list? I know that's tricky because everybody's waiting for a while, but
Yeah, and I know, especially with the last update coming out that no more names from the CIH and the family support will be pulled until July. I mean, it's hard, and we talk to families every day. I think all of our organizations talk to families every day who are patiently waiting for their name to be pulled. And I encourage you to connect with all of us, share where your struggles are, share what you're navigating, because like Tom said, one of the bills we're trying to address those waiting list names right now and maybe things that they might need in the meantime. And so we want to learn more about, where you're at with your journey, how we can maybe help, and where we can help connect you with resources or other things. But as we talked about in our last presentation, the waiver reset is the process is happening now. So we don't know how that will look in terms of wait lists and what that will look like in the future too. So I would encourage you as well to just keep connected with our organizations too, as things may come up and there are maybe more updates related to wait lists and other things like that.
I think there was a virtual reset date added for
I think
this.
Has it already happened?
It might have been yet last night. I know they added a virtual option.
Yeah, and I can send that out too. We can send an email out. The waiver reset team also is taking feedback right now. So that would be a great way to an opportunity if you're on that wait list and you have ideas on things that you might need resource wise or things that would be helpful during the wait time. That's a great thing to give feedback for the waiver reset team. So we'll make sure that that's in the follow-up email as well.
And I
Yeah.
would say also, all of our organizations not just do public policy, but we do help families navigate resources that aren't based within the state of Indiana. So we help you get resources other ways, and we can help you navigate some of the needs you might have and get resources that aren't based through Medicaid or governmental services.
Yeah. And I'll just mention too, I want to make sure that people aren't seeing a wait list saying, well, I'm not going to apply. If you are wanting a waiver, you should get in there now and apply, because it's better to get on your wait list now than wait because there's a wait list. Additionally, though, if you can, sometimes it might be eligible for Medicaid state plan services. That's certainly something to look into. So just don't, just because you see the wait list on the Medicaid waivers doesn't mean you shouldn't apply for the Medicaid state plan if you qualify for that. Also, if they're, children and teens, you can lean on school-based services, see what you can do in an IEP or 504 plan. If they're, transitional or adults, look at vocational rehabilitation. But certainly, like kind of Rachel and Macy mentioned, we're all here to help. All of our organizations have advocacy support to kind of walk you through some of these ideas. But certainly, document, especially as you're applying and you're waiting on the wait list. Not only should you stay updated with your Bees local office and making sure that they have everything they need, respond timely to anything they send, but also keep documentation about the needs, so that you can just stay organized and have all that ready when you need to.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. I think that is the end of our Q&A. So I think I think we're good.
Thank you guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate your time.